Hey everybody, Chad Bartlett here. Just going to go through a quick presentation talking about data-driven decision making when you're using those transition spreadsheets. So these transition spreadsheets are new. Why are we changing what we've been doing? We have a lot of great tools, a lot of great data. We want to make sure that we are using that when making decisions for students. So we are going to upload that data and give that to you ahead of time. Less work on your end, but a more powerful tool to help make recommendations for students. It gives us documentation to refer to at a later date, which is always great. We can look back if someone forgot something or if changes needed to be made. And then it really helps remove the bias from decision making. So want to make sure that we are using data as the forefront to help make those recommendations for students. So expectations is fairly simple. The step one is those who have the most knowledge, which is usually the roster teacher, is going to fill out information in each subject area. We have a couple different templates depending on the grade level you're at, but it's a similar process. Step two is that knowledge that you have of the student, the data that you have of the student. You're going to help make you're going to make a recommendation for what class that student should be in for the next school year. Then that information is going to be shared with the team that's going to be receiving the student, whether that's a new building or a new grade. And then that team is going to review that information and make a final decision for what that schedule will look like for the student. So on the sheet, you're going to see a number that has either a negative or a positive number, and that's a Z-score. That's what the data point that we chose to use for all of our assessments that are loaded onto these spreadsheets. A Z-score of 0 means that student is right in the middle. So they are the average score on that assessment for their entire grade level across the board. Regardless whether you have an IEP or you don't, they are right in the middle. Anybody who has a negative number is below the average. Anybody who has a positive number is above the average. You can see those negative 1, 2, 3 and the positive 1, 2, 3 on the bottom. That's talking about standard deviation, and I'll get into that here on the next slide. So if a student has a green number, that means they are anywhere from minus 0.99, negative 0.99, to positive 1.49, which means they are somewhere between 1 standard deviation below the average and 1.5 standard deviations above the average. If they are a green number, that means they are similar to their peers. And if you're similar to your peers, added support is likely not needed. However, if you are 1 standard deviation to 1.5 standard deviations below the average, it's likely that you would need some sort of service and some sort of extra support because you would be considered discrepant from your peers. Somewhere in the 5th to 15th percentile, depending on the score. And then students who are red, they are 1.5 standard deviations or more below their peers, and it's likely they are going to need some intensive support because they are considered significantly discrepant. So that's what those numbers mean. That's what that color coding will mean on the screen. So hopefully that's easy for you to understand. If not, obviously ask someone on the special education core team. So if a student is in a green range, an average range, the data is going to recommend a general education class. If they're in yellow, it's going to recommend more support needed, which might mean co-taught. If they're significantly discrepant, that's where a pull-out class could be part of the mix because intensive support is likely needed. Remember to look at each subject area individually. Just because a student struggles in reading doesn't mean they struggle in math and vice versa. So lastly, the thing I want you to really understand is that data doesn't tell the whole story. So you know your students better than any number does. So if a student's on that bubble or if they maybe test really well, it may not be the only indicator that they are going to be fine in general education. Maybe there's a reason they need co-taught services, but that's where that conversation comes into play and that team makes that decision. My soapbox, just so you guys know, remember, always think of least restrictive environment. We are really, really, really good at providing extra support, but sometimes we provide too many scaffolds. Make sure that we are letting kids have the opportunities that they're capable of succeeding in. So if a student is somewhere on that borderline, believe that maybe they can push themselves and get above, and maybe they can be in general education as opposed to co-taught or whatever the scenario may be. And if they do start to struggle, then we're there to catch them and we can help make up any sort of support that they need. Remember, if you have any questions, contact a member of the Special Education Core team. This is new for all of us, but I think this is going to really improve our process. I appreciate you guys listening to my little video here, and hopefully this process goes well. Thank you.